Hi guys, my name is Brady Bissett and welcome back to the classroom. And there is this long awaited discussion that I think needs to be brought up here. And that's the question of handheld or gimbal. Is there a right answer? Well, I mean, no. But is there? There's no right answer which one is better than the other, but it's more so each tool is going to provide its own pros and cons and its own benefit. I certainly do have a preference and lean towards one side, and that is handheld. Now, I'm not saying in any way that gimbals are garbage, you shouldn't have them, whatever. Everything has its own time and place. So when going into a project, as the creative on the project, you need to ask yourself, how do I want this to look? How do I want this to feel? Does the project require a lot of high-paced energy, a lot of motion, a lot of movement and emotion? If so, then handheld might be the route to go down. But if you really want this clinical, slow, smooth, almost maybe surreal feeling, or you've just got a really long tracking or walking shot, then a gimbal might be the route to go. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the pros and cons of using a gimbal. We'll get to the handheld stuff after. But first and foremost, gimbals are great for tracking shots or just any shots that need to stay smooth and steady in maybe a bumpy terrain, maybe a car or walking or even running. Or even if there is just a long take where the viewer might get uncomfortable with just constant moving and swaying and movement where they would maybe get seasick or car sick or motion sickness from it. Not really, but you get the point. You don't always want to be trying to follow someone like that. So a gimbal would be a great idea to just stabilize that, keep it still, keep it smooth as this long take is running out. And oftentimes your client will actually prefer all the shots to be smooth and stable and clinical and lack that natural camera shake. And then with a more steady camera, you don't run into the issue of any kind of motion blur or handheld motion blur. So your shots will actually be a little bit sharper as long as you're not throwing that gimbal around like crazy. For the most part, when being steady, you're gonna have a little bit more crisp, smooth picture or image coming out of your camera, which is great for certain circumstances. Obviously, I love the motion blur and the natural look sometimes, but there's other times when I just want this really super sharp, super crystal clean shot. A gimbal would be great for it. And then also you just have a lot more range of motion to do these really interesting, cool, dynamic moving shots. Got this mechanical kind of run and gun tool always on you, so you can do all those pans and tilts and swing around and all that cool motion. So that's definitely a perk of using a gimbal. One major super make or break frustration that I have with gimbals is that unless you have a second camera and you can afford to have a second camera, then disregard this. But switching everything back and forth, especially when you've got a whole cage rig set up and switching that over to your gimbal, it's just a pain in the neck. And then you got to balance it and get it all ready. And then before you know it, 25 minutes has passed and you either missed the shot or the sun is set and the time is gone. And that's time that you could have taken shooting. And I've definitely had scenarios where the sun is setting and I got to get these shots quick. And I'm like, why won't this gimbal balance? And I got to move everything over. It's a pain in the neck sometimes. So that's one of my personal frustrations. And then also when it comes to relying on technology, you're relying on battery and batteries die. And then that could leave you stranded. So that's another downfall as well when it comes to gimbals. Focus pulling. You're left with two options when you're running a gimbal when it comes to focusing. Your camera's autofocus, sometimes it's great. Sony's, some Canons, great autofocus. My Blackmagic, I don't know what autofocus is. So when I mount that, I've either gotta just, lock in the focus where I kind of want it and wing it, or I gotta get a focus pulling setup. And that's a pain in the neck 11 times out of 10. And it's also just more expensive things that you have to buy. So when it comes to focus pulling, that's just a pain. I mean, And as I said before, I'll say it once more, I've always found gimbals to have a little bit of a robotic sense to it, a very mechanical, kind of not authentic, organic human look to it. So that leads me over to the handheld side of things. And one thing that handheld is extremely great for is capturing the mood and conveying some sort of emotion with the camera sway and the camera movement. It almost makes the viewer feel as if they're there, as if they're in the scene, It's got this very personable and organic look that you really can't recreate with a stabilizer or anything like that. And it's also really great when running handheld to adjust for really sudden movement. So when your subject is going up and then down and then up and then over and across, and you can follow them really easy, you don't have to adjust the gimbal or move it certain ways or adjust joysticks and be like, hold on. It's just a pain to have to deal with that. So with handheld, you don't run into that issue. And then another thing is when you're in tight spaces, you don't have all this other gear, like this whole, extension. It's just you and the camera, and you can sit there, you can cram yourself in a corner and whatever, and you don't have all this other clunky gear on you. And then one other thing, as I mentioned focus pulling before, it's so much easier. I mean, I've got a gear on here which gives me extra grip for my focus pulling, but say you don't have that, ignore that. One hand you can balance on the focus, the other hand you can do here, and then you kind of balance it while focusing, and it works a lot better than, trying to gently turn it on a gimbal and like, oh, you ruin the whole shot. But handheld can be shaky. That's definitely a downfall of it. Whether your camera's super heavy or it's windy, you're crammed in a weird spot. I mean, the camera's all the way out there and you're shaking for the life of you. It can be shaky and you're gonna get motion blur sometimes, and that definitely is a downfall. I mean, you don't want completely blurry shots. And once you get into that weird spot where you start getting awkward camera shake instead of that camera sway that you want to go for, that's when you got to do something about it and do something to stabilize your footage a little bit more if you're going to stick to handheld. And a few ways to do that are, first of all, if your camera rig alone, just if your camera setup is a little bit heavier, say you got a cage on it, a monitor, matte box battery, something like that, it'll weigh the camera down a little bit, and that almost acts as a counterweight. So now the center of gravity isn't so close to your sensor, it's almost further out, and everything is gonna weigh down a little bit. The movements are gonna be a little bit slower. And it's just an excuse to buy more camera gear and make yourself look cooler. Or is that just me? I think it's just me. It might be you too. Yeah. But also a tool like an Easy Rig, like I've got on with that weird like antenna thing over me in some of these clips, that's a really useful tool. And although they do run kind of pricey, unfortunately, it's a great way to disperse the weight of your camera through your back, through your body, through your hips. That way you're not holding the weight and focusing and changing the camera movement. It holds the weight for you, so then you're focused about just camera direction and your framing and focus and composition. It's a lot easier, but not everybody can afford that. I could barely afford that. I probably can't afford it. I bought it, but I don't know, it was worth it. I think it was worth it. Saved my back a little bit. But if you don't have that, I mean, just using simple camera gripping techniques to stabilize your footage works just as well. The more points of contact you have on your camera, the better. It's less places that it can sway from. So say you've got your hand here on your focus ring, you've got your hand here, that's 2 points. Say you go ahead and take your elbows and jam those into yourself, so then it's really starting to not move. Or say you've got your camera on, a bigger rig, obviously this is kind of small and goofy, but then you kind of stabilize it there. Anything to just lock it into place. That way you've got a little bit more control over your camera movements and you're not just... But ultimately what it comes down to is asking yourself, again, how do I want this to look? What's the feeling of this project that I'm working on? When you're watching movies and you're watching films and commercials, study them a little bit. Say, is this a stabilized shot or is this handheld footage? How does it make you feel? How does it convey the emotion that they're trying to get across? And then you can even take your camera out with a gimbal and your handheld setup and just experiment with it and say, okay, I like the look of this handheld shot and I don't like the look of this gimbal shot, or vice versa. Feel out what works best for you, because we're in the arts. Everybody is different. Everyone's got their own creative vision. Everything is just unique to everyone's artistic, creative, creative eye. That's about all I've got for you guys today when it comes to using handheld or a gimbal. There's no black and white answer. It's all some in between. Use your best judgment to convey the emotion that you want to on the project that you're working on. But I hope that some of these tips help you understand the differences between the two of them and help you decide on your future project which you should really choose. But now the important part, because none of that is relevant, right? I'm giving away 3 different things. Why don't we go ahead and talk about the winners? Yeah? Maybe? Sure? So, first of all, I need to thank all of you so very incredibly much for just participating in this. Such an immense amount of you guys participated in this giveaway, so I just want to say thank you, and thank you once more. And it's definitely not going to be the last giveaway I'm doing, but let's go ahead and talk about the first winner, which is going to be winning the Aputure Amaran F7, the first winner. And bear with me in my poor pronunciation skills. Aldi Hidi, Aldihidi. I hope that pronunciation was right. Thank you so much, first of all, for participating, and congratulations on your new Aputure. And next up, the winner of the Zpon Micro 2 motorized slider, it is I can see it, but you can't. This must be killing you. Stephen Green, or Stephen Green. I can't read. This is why I do camera stuff, because I can't. Stephen or Stephen Green, I'm so sorry. But congratulations for you on that Z-Pawn slider. This thing is killer. I was just using it the other day. Once again, thank you so much. And then last but not least, we're talking about the Nanlite Forza 60B and softbox package here. The winner is Mr. Adam Karaksani. Probably poor pronunciation again. Laugh at me, please. But congratulations on your new Nanlite Forza 60B and softbox kit. It's a killer setup. I know you'll love it. I hope you'll love it. I don't know you, but I hope you love it. Fingers crossed. To you 3 winners, check your email. We'll get those sent out to you as soon as we can. I just need to get your shipping information. And to the rest of you who participated, it was over like 2,000 of you that entered into this giveaway, and that was just mind-blowing. So thank you all so much for participating. I'm sorry that I couldn't give you 2,000 lights and sliders and all of that, but I can promise you that it's not going to be my last giveaway. I can assure you of that. So that's all I've got for you guys today in the classroom. Thank you all so much. Take care. I'll see you next week, and class dismissed.